First thing Lieutenant Mara Voss noticed about the alien was that it breathed wrong. Not wrong in the way a machine breathes. Rhythmic, mechanical, forgivable. Wrong the way a predator breathes when it has already decided you are prey and is simply waiting for the geometry of the room. Agree with it. Short, staccato. Each exhale bitten off at the end, like punctuation in a language built entirely from threat. She pressed her back against the cold corridor wall of Research Station Kel 7 and listened. The station was supposed to be empty. It had been empty for 11 months, ever since the Gren had glassed the colony on Harrow's world, and the Interplanetary Science Compact had quietly mothballed every xenobiology outpost within 6 sectors, just in case whatever the Gren had found in the ruins of Harrow was contagious in ways they hadn't yet named. Kel 7 had been left in standby, life support minimal, corridors dark, every specimen in cryo, every experiment paused mid-breath. Paused, not ended. That was the word Director Achaby had used in the briefing 3 weeks ago, and Mara had let it pass without comment. The way you let a small lie pass when you need the contract and the contractor to like you enough to sign your vouchers. Paused. As if the 17 months of xenobiological research into Gren cognitive suppression compounds had simply taken a nap, waiting politely for someone to come back and wake it. Someone had. Just not the right someone. She could hear it 2 corridors over now. The way it moved was wrong too. Not the heavy quadrupedal thunder of a Gren combat unit, which she had trained for and survived twice. This was faster, lower to the ground, almost dancing the way sound dances when it has no fixed shape, when it is everywhere and nowhere, and you cannot localize it without giving yourself away in the act of listening. Mara did not move. She had 4 people left. When they had entered the station 6 hours ago, there had been 9 of them. A recovery team, technically, sent to retrieve the archived research data and confirm status on the station's biological specimens before the compact repurposed the facility. Standard assignment. The kind that got handed to people who were good enough to be trusted with delicate cargo, and not famous enough to be missed if something went sideways. 6 hours ago, she had not known the word Varric. She knew it now. Varric. That was what the research logs called it. The Gren's designation for the specimen housed in Containment Bay 4, Sublevel 3. Not a Gren. Not even remotely a Gren. Something older. Something the Gren had found on a world whose name was redacted in every document she had since read. Brought back to Kel 7 3 years ago as a scientific curiosity, the way an apex predator will sometimes carry a smaller predator's kill back to its den and turn it over with one enormous paw, not quite understanding what it has. The Gren scientists here had understood eventually. Mara had read enough of the logs, in the 47 minutes between landing and the first screaming, to understand that much. They had understood what they had, and then they had made the particular flavor of catastrophic mistake that species make when they are brilliant and have never in their evolutionary history encountered anything that bit back hard enough to matter. They had experimented on it. The compound was called Vel-9 in the research notes. A corticotropin analog designed to suppress aggressional responses in Gren warrior caste subjects by flooding the limbic equivalent with false calm signals. It worked beautifully on Gren subjects. On Varric, it had done something the Gren researchers called, in their clipped clinical language, an inversion cascade. Mara had a simpler name for it. She called it the wrong door. You push at the wrong door hard enough and long enough, doesn't lock. It opens onto something that was never meant to be opened. And whatever comes through is not the thing you were expecting, and it is not calm, and it is not manageable, and the lock you thought was keeping it out was actually keeping it in. The Gren researchers had managed to get one distress beacon out before Varric reached the communications bay. That beacon had been flagged as an equipment malfunction by 3 consecutive compact monitoring AIs and filed accordingly. The Gren research team, 11 scientists, 4 support staff, 2 security personnel, had not filed anything after that. The station had been placed in standby. Paused. Mara pressed her palm flat against the wall and felt the faint vibration of something moving through. The ductwork above her head, she thumbed her comms bead. Keo, status. A pause, then very quietly, we're in the secondary server room, me, Tash, Finn. It's... Keo stopped, started again. It was outside about 10 minutes ago we heard it. Then it left. It was testing the door, Mara said. Another pause, longer this time. Testing. It learns. The log said it learns. She said it the way she said everything now. Flat, without inflection. Because inflection costs energy, and energy was the only currency she had left in any quantity worth naming. It went around the east corridor first. Because that's where Specialist Duro was. It already knew where he'd be. It had already mapped the route. What she did not say. Duro had been carrying a tracker beacon, standard recovery equipment, one of 9 they'd brought aboard. She had disabled hers 20 minutes ago, with a trauma knife and a wall socket. She had tried to raise the others to tell them to do the same. Bear and Combe hadn't answered. She did not let herself think about why they hadn't answered. What do we do? Tash's voice, barely above a breath. Tash, who was 26, and had joined the Recovery Corps because it paid triple hazard on xenobiology assignments, and had thought, reasonably enough, that a mothballed station held approximately 0 xenobiology hazards. Mara looked down the corridor, 40 meters to the primary power junction. There, if she could reroute emergency power from the cryo bay grid to the containment bays, she could restore the electromagnetic locking fields on Varick's original cell. She had the access codes. They were in the data package she'd downloaded the moment she realized what they were dealing with. She had a route. She had a plan. She had exactly one problem with the plan, which was that the plan required her to be in 2 places simultaneously. Keo, she said, I need you to do something. Okay, I need you to make noise. The pause this time was very long. Define noise. Enough to hear through a wall. Not enough to be heroic about it. She looked at the ceiling, at the dark steel squares of the ventilation grill above her. I need it looking at you for about 4 minutes. Can you give me 4 minutes? Silence on the comms. She could hear Keo and Tash conferring in whispers. The way people confer, when they are deciding how much they trust the person asking the question, and how much they trust themselves to survive the answer. Then Keo said very quietly, yeah, we can give you 4 minutes. Keep the door sealed. Bang on walls, not the door itself. And Keo, yeah, don't open the door, whatever it does out there, whatever it sounds like. Don't open it. She moved. The corridor of Kel 7 was built for Gren, wide enough for 2 of their combat frames to pass abreast, ceilings 3 meters up, walls lined with the hexagonal data conduit panels that were the compact's aesthetic compromise when the Gren had joined as member species. The lights were emergency amber, which cast everything in the particular color of old photographs and bad memories. The floor was polished alloy, which meant footsteps, which meant Mara was walking on the thin strip of rubberized service matting that ran along the left wall and moving the way first field instructor had taught her to move in close quarters environments. Wait forward, wait quiet, breathe from the belly. Let the body lead where the mind would hesitate. She was at the junction box in 90 seconds. She popped the casing with the edge of her multi-tool and found the power routing array exactly where the station schematics said it would be. A grid. 64 color-coded relays. Gren standard, which meant the colors corresponded to a visual spectrum she only partially shared. She had the translation key in her head from 4 years spent as a compact liaison officer on mixed species postings. Green adjacent, 3rd row. Blue gold, 7th column. She started pulling relays. From 2 corridors away she heard Keo begin to make noise. Not screaming. Keo was smarter than that. Rhythmic banging. A slow knock-knock-knock against what sounded like a conduit pipe. The kind of sound that had no urgency to it, no fear, just irritating regularity like a faulty sensor on repeat. It was, thought with something close to admiration. Exactly right. Not panic. Presence. Particular presence of a creature that does not know it is being heard. She heard the ventilation duct above her shift. She went very still. The sound came again, a soft, deliberate scrape. Not accidental testing. The way you test a surface before you commit weight to it, which meant it was above her. Which meant it had been above her for some time before she got here. Which meant it had been watching her route this entire time. The cold understanding arrived without fanfare, the way the worst realizations always do. It had not been going toward the noise. It had been waiting for her to move toward the power junction. It had known where she was going before she got there. Mara did not freeze. Freezing was what the body wanted. The body was not in charge right now. She kept her hands on the relay array and kept pulling sequences, green adjacent, blue gold, amber 3, and she spoke into the comms at a normal volume, the same, flat, deliberate tone she'd used throughout. Keo, stop the noise, get low, away from the door, and stay there. A pause. Mara, Relay 14 through 21. I need 60 more seconds. She pulled relay 14. Tell me something, Keo. What? She pulled 15. 16. Tell me something that isn't about this station. Another pause. A different kind now. She heard Tasha's voice say something quiet in the background. Then Keo said, my grandmother makes this bread. Soda bread. Old style, the kind where you can't get the recipe from her because she doesn't measure anything, she just knows. She made it every Sunday when I was little. The whole apartment smelled like it. Mara pulled 1718. Above her, the vent panel creaked. She did not look up. What does it smell like, she asked. Like, Keo said, and she could hear him thinking, actually thinking. Going somewhere that wasn't this corridor, and this cold amber light. Like something that was always going to be warm, the world being on purpose. 19, 20, 21. The relay array clicked through its rerouting sequence, and somewhere deep in the station, she heard the low thrum of the electromagnetic containment field powering back up. A sound like a chord struck on. An instrument too large to see, felt more in the sternum than in the ears. The vent panel directly above her exploded outward. Varric dropped. She had seen the research images. Low-resolution thermal captures, mostly. The Gren visual documentation protocols prioritized data density over fidelity, which meant she had a sense of shape, of proportion, but not texture, not color, not the specific quality of wrongness that living creatures carry when they have been made into something their biology never intended. She had expected something roughly bipedal, something in the general silhouette of the Gren's other recovered xenospecimens, the flat-faced predator types that showed up in galactic survey data with depressing regularity, because apex predation seemed to be one of the universe's recurring aesthetic choices. What dropped from the vent was not that. It was low-bodied and dense, built like compressed intention. 4 limbs, yes, but they didn't move the way 4-limbed things move. Not sequential, not paired. They moved in whatever combination the task required, as if the concept of legs and arms was just a suggestion the body had heard once and decided to interpret freely. The face, and Mara's brain insisted on calling it a face despite everything, was broad and flat with a muzzle that was almost jaw, almost beak, almost neither, a structure that seemed to shift depending on what angle you caught it at. The eyes were amber, the same amber as the emergency lighting, and they did not blink. It had landed between her and the corridor exit. It had done this deliberately. She understood this the way you understand gravity. Not as a conclusion, but as a fact that has always been true, and you are simply encountering it. Now, okay, she said. She said it out loud. She did not know why. Maybe because the Gren logs had mentioned it, buried in a footnote that she'd almost skipped. A note from one of the Gren researchers written in the clipped passive construction of their scientific register, which Mara had learned to read as the Gren equivalent of barely controlled panic. Subject appears to respond to vocalizations with a brief orientation pause. Duration variable. Mechanism unclear. The brief orientation pause lasted approximately 1.5 seconds. She used it to throw the relay casing. Not at Varric, at the wall behind it. The hard metal ring of alloy on alloy that she had been calculating since she opened the panel. The angle that would get the sound far enough to the left to create a genuine orientation cue. Something the animal part of any predator's brain would have to check, even when the intelligent part knew better. It was the kind of gambit that worked once. That was enough. She was already moving when it turned, vaulting the conduit housing on the right side of the junction, hitting the service corridor at a sprint. Behind her, she heard Varric land, heard the flat crack of its body against the polished floor, and then she heard something she did not expect. A sound she could only describe as consideration. A pause with texture to it, like it was deciding whether she was worth the chase or whether something else was more interesting. Then she heard it come after her. And it was fast, it was terribly fast, and she was running the kind of run that has no finesse, no economy, just forward, 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 the walls blurring in the amber light. She made it to the pressure door at the end of the service corridor and hit the manual seal. The door came down. She heard Varric hit the other side not 2 seconds later, a sound like something made of muscle and certainty testing the limits of what a door is willing to be. The door, station-grade alloy, rated for pressure differential events. She stood on the other side and breathed. Comms crackled. Mara, Kyo's voice. Something, just the vibration in the walls changed. Did you? Containment field is up, she said. It's not going to help us get Varric back in its cell. That would require getting past it, which, she stopped, thought, is exactly what it's counting on. Silence from Kyo. Say that again, Tash's voice now. It hurted us, Mara said. The shape of it was assembling in her mind the way tactical problems assembled. Not all at once, but in pieces that found each other. The containment field covers the original bay and the 2 corridors adjacent to it. If Varric gets us to stay away from those corridors, it never has to go back in. It's not trying to kill us efficiently, it's trying to keep us contained. She could hear Tash breathing. Rapid. She tracked it for a few seconds the way you track a patient. Watching for the particular rhythm of panic that tips over into something you can't. Someone back from. Tash, she said. How are you doing? A laugh, surprised and brief. Honestly, pretty badly. That's the right answer, Mara said. Wrong answer is fine. Fine means you've stopped processing. Processing is good. She pulled up the station schematic on her wrist display and started tracing corridors with one finger. There are 3 structural weaknesses in the station's ventilation network. The Gren built these stations with thermal expansion margins that create microgaps at junction points every 11 meters. Varric knows the vents. It's been using them, which means it knows where those gaps are too. Okay, Kyo said slowly. The gap at Junction 7 is directly above the specimen cold storage corridor. Cold storage runs parallel to the primary research floor. She traced the route. If I can get to Junction 7, I can drop into a corridor that Varric hasn't been in. It hasn't been there because there's nothing in there it wants. It's all sealed containers of inert biological material. Nothing warm, nothing with a heartbeat. Until you're in it, Tash said. Until I'm in it, Mara agreed. From cold storage, there's direct access to Containment Bay 4 via the specimen transfer corridor. That corridor has a manual gate. If I get through that gate and into the bay, you're in Varric's original cell, Kyo finished. Yes. And then it comes in after you. Yes. And then? Mara looked at her wrist display, looked at the bay schematic, looked at the notation she'd flagged 40 minutes ago, and then set aside because it hadn't seemed relevant until now. And then I closed the gate behind it, she said. From inside. Silence. The bay door controls are on the outside, Kyo said very carefully. The way you say something very carefully when you are hoping to be wrong. There's a secondary panel, Mara said. Search stations always have secondary panels. You don't want to get trapped in a containment bay with no way to open the door from inside. That's how you get dead researchers. Kel 7 built a secondary panel into the bay wall near the ventilation coupling. I can reach it. I can trigger the gate seal from inside. And then you're locked in with it, Tash said. In a sealed electromagnetic containment bay, Varric cannot reach inside. The logs confirm it tried repeatedly before the initial escape. The field runs to the walls. She paused. And I will not be trying to cage it. I'll have the junction access panel from the transfer corridor. From inside the bay, I can reach the station's primary power relay through that panel. More silence. She let them have it. They had earned it. The station's power relay, Kyo said slowly. Emergency broadcast, Mara said. If I cut the conduit array and reroute through the comms array, I can boost the distress signal from 1 sector range to 6. That's enough to reach the compact relay at Harrow Way Station. She let a breath out. Rescue team gets here in 14 hours. They have the sedation protocols. They have the equipment. She looked at the pressure door. We just have to keep enough of us alive for 14 hours. Including you, Tash said. In the bay with it. Including me. She did not say the other part. The part that she had done the math on and arrived at an answer she didn't love. That the bay's internal oxygen recycling was not rated for extended occupancy, and that boosting the comms signal would draw power from life support, and that 14 hours in a sealed bay with a creature that had just murdered 6 of her colleagues and was demonstrably capable of holding a Strategic grudge was not what she would have chosen if the universe had asked her preference. The universe had not asked her preference. Okay, Kyo said. And then, wait for us at Junction 6, we're coming with you. Kyo. Server room has event access that doesn't route through the main network. Tash figured it out. Tash is very good at vents. I grew up in a building with bad plumbing, Tash said. Learn. Mara stood in the amber corridor and felt something move in her chest that she hadn't expected to feel in the last 6 hours. It was not comfort exactly. It was not hope exactly. It was something more pragmatic than either of those. The particular sensation of not being alone in a problem, which is different from the problem being solved, but which is, she had found sometimes enough. Junction 6, she said. 8 minutes. She moved. Shh. The three of them met at Junction 6 incident, which Mara counted as a specific and deliberate gift from a universe that didn't hand them. Tash was smaller than her voice suggested, small-framed, dark-eyed, with the particular composure of someone who had decided, somewhere in the last 2 hours, that panic was a luxury they could no longer afford, and had simply set it down and kept walking. Kyo was tall and methodical, and moved the way engineers move, always looking at the structure of whatever space they were in, noting load-bearing elements and power, conduits the way other people note furniture. They made it through cold storage in 4 minutes. Nothing moved in the rows of sealed containers. The temperature was 6 degrees, and the lighting was blue-white and functional. And the contrast from the amber corridors was disorienting, in a way that felt almost like surfacing from water. Mara paused at the entrance to the specimen transfer corridor and looked back at them. "You two do not come through this gate," she said. Kyo started to speak. "The gate locks from inside once I trigger the seal. That's the point. You can't follow me in." She looked at them both. At Tash's set jaw and Kyo's carefully neutral expression, the one that meant he was managing his own reaction, so it didn't slow either of them down. "What you can do is get to the auxiliary comms panel on sublevel 2. It can't boost the signal the way the primary relay can. It can open a channel. 14 hours is a long time. Keep the channel open." "What do we say?" Tash asked. "Tell them what's here. Tell them what Varric is. Tell them the whole thing." She paused. "Make sure they send sedation protocols, not weapons. If they come here with weapons, the containment bay becomes a kill box, and Varric dies in it, which means the research dies with it. Which means the compact learns nothing, which means the next team that finds something like this doesn't know what to do either." Kyo looked at her for a long moment. "You care about that?" he said, not critical, genuinely asking. "I care about the people in the next team," she said. She went through the gate. She did not look back, because if she looked back, she would see their faces. And she needed to be made of something simpler than whatever that would cost her. The transfer corridor was narrow and service-lit, and smelled like recycled atmosphere and the faint metallic undernote of the station's scrubbing systems. She was halfway down it when she heard the ventilation duct above her begin to flex. She did not run. Not yet. She kept walking, even pace. She wanted it to know where she was going. She wanted it to follow, but to follow at the speed of curiosity, rather than the speed of the chase. There is a difference. She had learned from a field manual written by someone who had clearly survived something much worse than this. Predator pursuing prey runs at the prey's speed plus. A predator following something it finds interesting moves at its own pace. You want to be interesting. She was interesting. She was a human female, bilaterally symmetrical, 93% hairless by Gren xenobiological standards, equipped with a multi-tool and 3 hours of emergency oxygen and a face that did not express what it was feeling, which the Gren researchers' logs had noted Varric found particularly difficult to parse. Unknown expressions. That was in the footnotes. Subject demonstrates extended orientation behavior in response to subjects displaying atypical vocalizations or unknown expressions, duration variable but significant. Mara considered, as she walked the last 12 meters of the transfer corridor, what her expression looked like right now. She decided it probably looked like someone who had already finished being afraid and was now in the specific country that lies beyond fear, the one with no name on most maps, where the only currency is attention and the only language is decision. She reached the Containment Bay 4 entrance, pressed her access code. The door slid open on a space that was larger than she'd expected. 10 meters, square, with the electromagnetic field projectors built into the wall panels in hexagonal mounts, currently humming at operational frequency. The secondary control panel was where the schematic said it would be, 2 meters up the left wall, embedded in the junction housing. She went to it. Behind her, something dropped into the transfer corridor from the vents. She kept her hands on the control panel, did not turn. She heard it breathe, that staccato broken rhythm, short exhales bitten off. She heard its limbs on the corridor floor, that strange unsequenced movement. She heard it pause at the entrance to the bay, and in the pause she felt the full weight of what it was doing. It was reading her. The way it had read the corridors, the way it had read the tracker signals, the way it had read the blast door and found it worthy, and set it aside. It was reading her, and she was letting it. She turned around. She had read enough of the logs to know that the Gren researchers, when they worked with Varric, had never done this, had never simply turned and looked. They had always been lateral, always peripheral, always maintaining the studied non-acknowledgement of the small prey animal that hopes to be overlooked. She understood why. She also understood that it hadn't worked. She turned and looked directly at it. The amber eyes met hers. The brief orientation pause stretched. 1 second, 2, 3, 4. She held eye contact the way her grandmother had taught her to hold eye contact with the dogs they kept on the farm. Not aggressive, not submissive, just present. I am here, I see you. I am not pretending otherwise. She saw something shift in the structure of its face. She could not name it. She had no reference for it, but she felt, in the marrow way, that some information arrives before the brain has time to process it. That Varric had not been looked at like this before. Not by anything. I know what they did to you, she said. It tilted its head. That orientation behavior, slight, precise. It was a mistake, she said. What they put in you, what they turned on. They didn't understand what they were doing. She kept her voice level. Gentle. Gentle could read as weak, and weak was the wrong message. Level, factual. They do that a lot. Find something they don't understand and push at it until it opens. It's a very stupid habit. She paused. I'm here because someone has to not be stupid. Because if you die in this bay, everything they did to you just becomes a data point, and they'll do it again to something else. The eyes did not blink. I'm going to seal this door, she said. And then I'm going to sit in the corner and not make any sudden movements. And you're going to do whatever you decide to do. And in 14 hours, someone is going to come and help both of us get out of this room. She reached back and pressed the gate seal on the secondary panel. The bay door closed behind her, with a sound like finality being agreed upon. Varric had not moved. Mara sat down, crossed it on the floor back against the wall, the secondary panel above her head, the electromagnetic field, humming in the walls all around them. She reached into her kit and pulled out the emergency ration bar she'd been carrying since the briefing and unwrapped it. The smell of synthetic glucose and something that was trying to be chocolate filled the small space. She broke it in half. She set one half on the floor in front of her, 8 inches from her knee. She ate the other half slowly, looking at the wall to the left of Varric, not at Varric. Peripheral acknowledgement, present but not pressing. You are here, I am here. The room is big enough for both of us. She heard it move, not toward her, not toward the ration bar, just a shift in position, a settling of weight onto a different configuration of limbs. The breathing changed, slightly. Still staccato, but the endings were a little less bitten, a little less decided. Mara looked at the power relay panel on the left wall and began planning the reroute sequence in her head. She worked methodically, the way her field instructor had taught her to work, when there was nothing to do but wait, and planning was the only constructive use of time. From the outermost components inward, building the architecture of the solution before she touched anything, so that when she did touch things, she would touch them in order and not waste the motion. The first thing she noticed was that it moved closer. Not much, half a meter maybe, but she tracked it in her peripheral vision, and she was certain. The second thing she noticed was that the orientation tilts, the small precise adjustments of its head, were happening more frequently. Tracking her hands, watching the small movements she made as she worked through the sequence in her head. Touching panels with 2 fingers, checking conduit access points. The third thing she noticed was it smelled different than the research images had suggested. The Gren documents described a chemical signature: acrid, high phosphate, aggressive. What she was actually smelling was something more complex, layered. Not pleasant, but not what the documents had said. Like the documents had been written by people who had met the version of it that had been made into something else, and she was meeting the original, or something close to it, coming back to itself in increments. She thought about Kyo's grandmother's bread, the world being on purpose. She reached up and began the rerouting sequence on the primary power panel. Took 11 minutes. Her hands were steady. She had to change 2 physical relay connections, required her to stand and reach above shoulder height. And when she did this, she was aware, precisely and continuously, of Varric in the room. She worked anyway. This was the thing about being specifically human that she had never been able to fully articulate to non-human colleagues. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to work in spite of it. The absolute refusal to let what you feel determine what you do. It was not bravery in the legendary sense. It was more like stubbornness wearing bravery's coat. The rerouted signal boosted at 0340 station time. The comms channel opened. She heard Kyo's voice first. "Still here, still monitoring. Please respond if." "It's open," she said. "Signal's up." She heard Tash say something wordless that was either a prayer or a profanity. And then Kyo saying, "Good, good. We've got a partial response from Harrow Way Station. They're sending a team."
14 hours.
14 hours, Mara confirmed. She sat back down on the floor. She looked at the half-ration bar still sitting 8 inches from her knee. It had not been touched. She looked at Varric. It was, she realized, watching her in the same way she had been watching it. Not directly, not quite, peripheral, present. The amber eyes were focused approximately 2 feet to her left, at the same distance hers were to its right. Mutual not quite looking, which was somehow both weirder and more comfortable than she'd expected. 14 hours, she said, to the room, to neither of them specifically. Breathing, almost imperceptibly, changed. She could not call it calm. She was not going to call it calm. It was something more provisional than calm. Something that would require more than 14 hours, and considerably more than one human and one broken ration bar to understand properly. But it was different from what it had been, and different from what it had been was the direction she needed, so she took it. She leaned her head back against the wall. She did not sleep. She was not going to sleep. That was not a reasonable option in this room at this time, and she knew exactly what the lines of this situation were, and she was not going to step over them out of desperation or exhaustion. She let her eyes half close, just enough to take the intensity down 1 register. Just enough to signal, "I am not watching you every second." Just enough to say without saying it, "I know you're there, and I'm going to stop performing awareness of you and just be here, the same way you're here." 3 hours into the wait, the ration bar was gone. She did not look to see where it had gone. She noticed the absence, and she set the scene aside carefully. The way you set aside something that means more than you want it to mean before. You've had time to figure out what it actually means. Kyo checked in every 90 minutes. Each time he said they were still clear, still holding, the auxiliary signal still open. Each time he ended with something small and unnecessary. A weather observation from a planet he'd been stationed on. Once, a fact about the geological survey they'd been doing before this assignment. The detail that Tash had found, in a storage locker on Sublevel 2, a container of real coffee in vacuum-sealed packets, and had made 2 cups, and that the coffee was exceptional. "Save 1, Mara told him. "1 what?" "1 packet." A pause. Okay, she did not explain. It seemed unnecessary. The rescue team arrived in 13 hours and 40 minutes, which was either excellent response time or a very lucky trajectory, and they came with sedation protocols as she had asked. And they came with a specialist in Gren xenobiology, who was very young and very excited and stood in the transfer corridor and looked at the readings from the containment bay sensors. With an expression of pure, unmanaged awe. "It's quiescent," the specialist said. "The readings, it's almost, I mean relative to baseline, this is." She looked at Mara, who had been escorted out of the bay by 2 medics, while Varric watched from the corner, with the amber eyes, patient, unhurried. "How did you?" "I didn't do anything to it," Mara said. "That's the point." She looked back through the bay's external viewer. Through the small rectangular window that showed Varric still in its corner, still present, still watching. "You want to know what I did?" "Yes," said the specialist. "I sat on the floor and I ate half a ration bar," Mara said. "And I looked at the wall. And I said the word 14 hours out loud, until it became the right shape of time instead of an impossible one." The specialist stared at her. "And I talked to my team," Mara added. "I let them talk to me." She looked at the window a moment longer. The Gren researchers never had anyone else in the room with them. Always single researcher protocols. Efficiency. She said the word without any particular emphasis, which was the specific kind of emphasis that meant something. "You can't do this kind of work alone. Whatever this kind of work is." She picked up her kit. "That should probably go in the logs." She walked down the transfer corridor toward the smell of coffee. Keo was waiting at the junction with 2 cups. He handed her one without a word. She held it in both hands. The warmth of it specific and real and absurdly, disproportionately, exactly right. She drank it. It was exceptional. In the containment bay behind her, in the hum of the electromagnetic field and the blue sight stillness of a room that had decided, provisionally, to be something other than a kill box, Varric the second half of a ration bar and looked at the wall. The universe, from time to time, agrees to be on purpose. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't repeat itself. It doesn't ask whether you deserve it. It simply opens, like a door no one expected to work, swinging wide in the amber dark, letting through something warmer than the corridor it came from. And you either walk through it or you don't. Mara Voss walked through it. She took the coffee with her,